Hello.
Hi, how are you?
All right, what's going on?
Hey,
Hey.
Hey, Benjamin. Um, BSA approved 2470 for 18 months.
18 months. Okay.
So functionally, they'll have they didn't call it this, but a compliance hearing.
Hmm. And I guess that means the board well, they'll have to come back to us after 18 months, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna try to follow up with it. I mean, they were so kind to Elise and the applicant that sort of surprised me. I thought that they were gonna go with the full community board recommendation and
Right.
they poo-pooed my my testimony and evidence. So, but they must have a sense.
Yeah, I think they were able to gather it through the through the context.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, Melissa,
Hi,
how are you?
Veronica.
Oh, hello.
I'm
Doing
sorry.
well. How about you?
Good.
Yeah. Was
Rana, you're gonna take point on presenting, correct?
Yep, I'll present and I'm going to be the one sharing my slides. So
Okay. Do you want to test drive that or are you feeling confident in it?
that'd be great. We're not a usual WebEx user, so I will try that now.
It's the one the city gives us for free.
Okay.
Yep.
You guys seeing the deck? I'll make it full screen. Okay, cool. That looks good on your end?
It does.
Cool. I can leave it up or stop sharing in the meantime if you guys want to have it. You know, I don't know if we're the first thing or only thing.
It's up to Greg and Melissa.
Let's see. How does it show best for people watching? Maybe take it down just for the moment, and then we'll introduce you, and then you can lead into it.
Sure thing.
yeah, we are going to have another speaker after you,
Okay, cool.
but you are
It's
first.
down now.
Yeah, I have 6:30, so happy to begin if we'd like. Oh, you're on mute, Sean.
Sorry, I was just saying we're good to go whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. All right, so Melissa, I guess I'll lead it off here. Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Alvarez. I'm co-chair along with Melissa Minnick.
Good evening.
Good evening of the Community Board 14's Housing and Land Use Committee. We're here this evening, March 24th, 2025, with two presenters. So first off, we're going to have Veronica Brown. Is that your preferred? Veronica Brown from the Department of City Planning, who will provide updates on the implementation of City of ES zoning text amendments, specifically in Community District 14. After that, we will have Anthony Coker, Program Manager at Neighbors Helping Neighbors, who will provide programs for tenants and first-time home buyers. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Veronica Brown to provide her presentation, and then afterwards we will have time for questions. So Veronica, take it away.
Great, thanks so much for having me. I'm joined also by Hanif Yazdi and Josh Vogel of the Department of City Planning's Brooklyn office. Alex Summer, the director of the Brooklyn office, will be joining us shortly. I work in the housing division. Some of you may remember me from the public review process. I work in the housing division on this text amendment on CityVS for housing opportunity. So I'm excited to be back. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen again. Okay. So I'm going to do a brief presentation, about 20 minutes. Happy to take any questions that you all might have. So we're going to be discussing CityVS for housing opportunity as it was adopted by City Council. I'm going to highlight how the zoning changes affect Brooklyn Community Board 14 and how the final adopted text was changed from the original proposal that you have previously heard about during the public review process. So this is the third CityVS for housing opportunity, was the third of 3 text amendments. So the first, obviously, was CityVS for carbon neutrality, which was passed in December 2023. That's already helping us to decarbonize New York City through a variety of measures, making it easier to install green technology, modernizing zoning rules to make our homes, businesses, electric power grid, and waste streams much cleaner. CityVS for economic opportunity, which was passed in June 2024, provides clear and sensible rules that give businesses flexibility so they can change and grow. It removed outdated limitations on businesses, supports growing industries, and helps local retail, streets, and commercial corridors thrive. And finally, CityVS for housing opportunity was enacted on December 5th, 2024, and is the most pro-housing zoning change in the history of New York City. It enables the creation of up to 82,000 homes across the next 15 years, and that's an incremental growth throughout every neighborhood in the city. The City Council also committed $5 billion in investments to infrastructure and housing alongside these zoning changes. So I'm going to walk through the CityVS for housing opportunity zoning changes specific to Community Board 14. I'll show some specific maps. I'll highlight both your recommendations in your vote as well as the modifications that may have responded to those. But just for a brief overview before we get into it, CityVS for housing opportunity is a diverse array of zoning changes that respond to different neighborhood contexts while introducing new housing opportunities to every single part of the city. So this includes changes in the lower density parts of the city to allow more missing middle housing, low-rise apartment buildings, changes that aim to help homeowners by allowing for accessory dwelling units or ADUs, changes in the higher density parts of the city, the R6 to R10 zoning districts, most importantly, the universal affordability preference, which is UAP. And across the city, the proposal would reduce residential parking mandates, lowering the cost of building new housing. This is a proposal that notably changed quite a bit during public review, so I'll take some time there to explain how the new parking requirements work. But first, I'll start in the low density parts of the city. So the low density districts are R1 to R5 zoning districts. Transit-oriented development is the first policy we're going to go through here. It enables low-rise buildings of 3 to 5 stories, depending on the underlying zoning, near subway and rail stations. This change affects R3, R4, and R5 districts. Note this is a significant modification in response to community feedback. The proposal originally also applied in R1 and R2 single-family districts, but that's no longer the case in the adopted text in order to respect the single-family character of these districts. Brooklyn Community Board 14 voted do not approve with the condition to carve out Victorian Flatbush neighborhoods. And while this exemption could not be added because it would have undermined the fair housing principles of this proposal, the neighborhoods that have single-family zoning in Victorian Flatbush are no longer affected by this proposal. To get into the map here, for sites to qualify for transit-oriented development, they must meet specific criteria. And I'll go now to this map that shows Community Board 14 and shows the heights, the maximum height of the building, 35, 45, or 55 feet, according to the gradation of blue. So in the criteria for transit-oriented development, largely similar to the criteria you heard about in public review, the site must be within the greater transit zone, which means it's on a block within 0.5 miles of a subway or within 0.25 miles of some regional rail services where service is less frequent. Second, The lot has to be over 5,000 square feet, which is about twice the size of an average city lot. And finally, the lot must be located on the short end of the block or on a wide street, which zoning defines as being over 75 feet wide. So if sites meet these criteria, they are then called qualifying residential sites in the zoning resolution text. So that's where you'll find information about transit-oriented development in the text. It's following the rules for qualifying residential sites. They get access to the heights and FARs necessary that are to build a 3 to 5 story apartment building. City of Yes also re-legalized mixed-use apartments or buildings with a ground floor commercial use and a few stories of housing on top. Classic New York City building type exists in many low-density commercial corridors, but overly complex zoning was making it impossible to build new buildings like this. So under these changes, floor area and height limits would enable buildings with a commercial ground floor and then 2 to 4 stories of housing on top, depending on the zoning district. These mixed-use buildings are allowed wherever there are commercial overlays paired with a low-density R1 to R5 zoning district. During public review, there were some modifications introduced to make sure this only applies in truly commercial areas. So for example, areas where only an isolated single block is zoned for commercial use, or areas that are zoned for commercial use but developed with only 1 or 2 family homes would not be eligible for this proposal. This proposal has some applicability in Community District 14, but relatively limited because many of the commercial corridors are R6 to R10. But heights and FARs vary by zoning district and geography to enable 3 to 5 story buildings. But within the greater transit zone, which is in the dark gray on this map, so almost all of Community Board 14, buildings are allowed to be 5 stories tall. Community Board 14 voted to approve this proposal with the condition that Fresh, the grocery store provision, remains in place, which it does. It's unaffected by this text amendment. City of Yes also took the historic step of bringing inclusionary housing to low-density areas, which is a notable modification from the original proposal in response to community feedback asking for increased affordability in low-density areas. So new buildings through either of those proposals that I just went, or either of those policies that I just went through, new buildings built through the qualifying residential sites rules that have over 50,000 square feet of floor area, that's approximately 50 unit building, would have to set aside a portion of their floor area for affordable housing. Affordable space will equal 20% of the market rate space in the building. So if you had a 50 unit building, that sort of minimum there, 42 would be market and 8 would be affordable. And these homes would be affordable for households earning an average of 80% area median income, or AMI, which is about $111,000 for a family of 3. This will help to create housing for all income levels in the low density parts of New York City. In the rest of the low density areas, zoning changes were aimed to give homeowners more flexibility. A single or single or two family home would now be able to add a small accessory dwelling unit, also known as an ADU. There's a few different types of ADUs. Backyard, garage, and basement apartments are all examples. Throughout the public process, we heard concerns about accessory dwelling units related to safety and neighborhood character, including in Community Board 14's conditions. So the final text amendment does include some modifications from what was originally proposed. I'll move on to the next slide so you can see how this applies to your district. But the conditions here that were added were basement and detached ADUs, also known as backyard ADUs, would not be allowed in areas susceptible to coastal or inland flooding. The exact geographies that define coastal or inland flooding are being developed by DEP right now and will be established in mid-2025. No basement or detached ADUs can be permitted until these rules are finalized. Second, detached ADUs are not allowed in historic districts or in R1-2A, R2A, or R3A contextual districts. You have some historic districts in this neighborhood that would not allow the detached backyard ADU. And finally, all ADUs now have a homeowner occupancy requirement, meaning the homeowner must live on site when the ADU is originally created and occupied. Community Board 14's condition that building ADUs have a public process rather than an as-of-right path would have made building ADUs impossible for homeowners who are not professional developers. So the same rule changes that enable accessory dwelling units can also help homeowners who don't want to add an ADU, but just need some more flexibility to adapt and renovate their home to meet their family's needs. Through increases to height and FAR and adjustments to yard regulations, it's once again possible to build a 2-family home in a 2-family district or a multifamily home in a multifamily district. As many of you will likely remember, the original proposal included a specific provision for Community District 14, as well as Community Districts 11 and 15 in Brooklyn, whereby in R1 to R3 districts, the maximum FAR was proposed to increase to 1.0. Community Board 14 included the condition in their vote that this extra FAR be limited to the previous special permit area, which previous to City of Yes was R2 districts bounded by Avenue I, Nostrand, Kings Highway, Avenue O, and Ocean Avenue. In the final adopted text, which you can see in 23-242, the max FAR is 1.0 only available. The max FAR of 1.0 is only available south of Avenue H. So responding to that condition. Another concern with the district fixes we heard, especially elsewhere in the city, was about the creation of McMansions with the FAR bump that was extended to make two-family or multifamily buildings possible. There was a concern that people instead would use this to build overlarge, out-of-character single-family homes. So to address this concern, City Council modified the proposal so that additional FAR is restricted to lots below 4,000 square feet. Lots above 4,000 square feet would be limited to 0.6 FAR in the R1 to R3 districts, rather than the 0.75 they would otherwise be allotted. Okay, so next I'm going to turn to the medium and high density parts of New York City. Our focus here is on creating more affordable housing. To do this, City of Yes introduces the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP. UAP allows apartment buildings to be at least 20% larger, so long as that extra space is occupied by permanently affordable or supportive housing. By extending an as-of-right preference for affordable housing to every R6 to R10 district, UAP would allow incremental housing growth in the neighborhoods and encourage affordable housing throughout the city, rather than concentrating it in only a few neighborhoods as it is today. Universal affordability preference is pretty similar to as adopted, as you heard about it when it was proposed, has an affordability requirement of 60% area median income. 60% AMI is about $83,000 for a family of 3. So UAP serves lower income New Yorkers than previous zoning tools like voluntary and inclusionary housing. It also serves New Yorkers at even lower income levels than 60% AMI through income averaging, which means that instead of only including homes at the required affordability level, a building can include homes at a range of incomes that average to 60% area median income. So for example, a building could include 3 bands of units at 40% area median income, 60% area median income, and 80% area median income, and meet this requirement. There was one modification added to universal affordability preference that if buildings have over 10,000 square feet of UAP floor area, they would be required to have that 40% AMI band. So this is a modification to ensure deeper affordability is included. Oh, and here you see the R6 to R10. These are all R6 to R10 districts or their equivalents in Community Board 14. So this is where universal affordability preference applies in this community district. Okay, so finally, City of Yes rolls back parking requirements in areas with good access to transit. This is a significant modification from the original proposal to make parking optional citywide. Instead, parking will be completely optional only in areas with the best access to transit, which you see in this map in the darkest blue color, referred to as Zone 1 on this map. Parking requirements would be reduced but not fully removed in areas that are less central but still have good transit access, which is shown in light blue, Zone 2, and remain largely the same as before City of Yes in areas that lack good transit access, which is shown in green. Citywide, certain types of housing, including affordable housing, conversions, missing middle housing, and accessory dwelling units, are exempt from parking requirements. So just to zoom in on Community Board 14, Community Board 14 is almost entirely in Zone 2, or the outer transit zone. So this is where parking requirements were significantly reduced, but not eliminated. And just to walk you through an example of how it works in a district, in an R7A district, which is like what you have along Ocean Avenue or Coney Island Avenue, in this blue area, the outer transit zone, there's now a 15% parking requirement. That's a significant reduction from the previous 50% parking requirement. And what's more, buildings with less than 15 spaces, so in other words, under 100 units, because only a building under a building is a 15% parking requirement, you'll remember, can waive out. So those buildings can waive out of parking entirely. So we have significantly reduced parking as a barrier to new housing. Also in commercial districts, non-residential parking may also be waived in the outer transit zone if the lot is under 10,000 square feet in a mixed building. The changes did not affect commercial parking in purely commercial buildings. Okay, so just to conclude, this was a historic zoning text amendment that represents the culmination of years of community engagement going back to where we live in New York City, the city's comprehensive fair housing plan. Zoning, however, is only one tool in the city's toolbox when it comes to addressing our housing crisis. So alongside City of Yes, City Council passed a $5 billion investment in housing and infrastructure. We believe that this will help to turn the tide on our housing crisis. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
All right, thank you very much. So at this time, we will entertain questions that has been generated from Ms. Brown's presentation. So I invite anyone who would like to ask a question, just hit your hand button, and then we'll take questions in the order they're received. Okay, nothing yet. So why don't I just kick it off here, just a few questions. So in your presentation, you started with the low density in the town center proposals, and you say that they were re-legalized. Could you just explain that concept, because wasn't quite sure what that meant?
Sure. I think what that just means to say is that many buildings built in New York City before 1961, before our current restrictive zoning was put into place, look like these buildings. You know, they're in a commercial, low-rise commercial strip. You might see these sort of 2 to 4 stories of housing above a commercial ground floor, but you couldn't build that today. So when we say they're just being re-legalized, we just mean bringing back a popular building form from before zoning got in the way.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much for that. So we do have one question so far. We have board member Denise. So if you'd like to ask your question, please do.
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the detail you put into this and showing all the applicability and so forth. I just wanted to, it's a little, it's not directly related to the City of Yes changes, but I was wondering if you could speak a little more to fair housing principles and like what that looks like in 2025, because I know that that's been something that's really changed over the course of my time in New York City. And I think we're trying to get to a more inclusive, more equitable housing structure. But I just think that would be really helpful for us as board members to have as we both consider, other things like City of Yes, but also, other ULURPs that might come our way. And, since you're in the department that's kind of the experts on this, would love to hear your take. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. So the city put out a fair housing plan, a comprehensive fair housing plan, where we live, New York City, in 2020. They're currently, it was spearheaded by the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, HPD. I think they've produced periodic updates to how they're doing, and I think they are working on run right now, actually. But where we live outlines the goals and strategies to achieve a more equitable New York City. Equitable along axes of race, of class, of disability, of gender. And those, many of these proposals, like universal affordability preference, for example, emerge directly from where we live, especially proposals that aim to create incremental housing growth citywide. Right now, the zoning before City of Yes for housing opportunity had forced some neighborhoods to produce more than their fair share of the city's housing. This, was not an ideal situation for anyone. If you wanted to live in a neighborhood that wasn't producing a lot of housing, you likely couldn't find an apartment. If you wanted to, if you lived in a neighborhood that was experiencing seismic changes, you also perhaps were not happy. So City of Yes for Housing Opportunity aims to take a new approach, which is the incremental growth citywide. And we think that a little bit of housing in every neighborhood ethos really is tied to where we live plan. It's not to say there's not a place for neighborhood plans, obviously. The Brooklyn office can speak more to neighborhood planning, but neighborhood plans go hand in hand with this sort of citywide approach in unlocking housing in appropriate locations. So hopefully that answered your question. I can drop a link to where we live in the chat because you all might be interested in reviewing it or having HPD come talk to you about it, since it's really their baby.
Yeah, that definitely hit on the points I was curious about and really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Mark Young. So, Mark, please go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you to the community board for having this hearing. So I represent a neighborhood association in an R3X neighborhood, And I had two factual questions just about the transit oriented development proposal that I think I know the answer to, but I want to just get it confirmed. If there's a property that meets the 5,000 square foot requirement, and it abuts a short end of a block and also a wide street, does it, in order to be qualified for the TOD development or a building, does it matter where the door faces on the private residence, like currently? I don't believe it does, but I just want to confirm. A few residents have asked that question.
No, it just has to have a frontage on the short dimension of the block or the wide street. So like obviously where the door is might change and zoning doesn't control that. So yeah, so you're correct in your understanding that it's the frontage is a frontage is not defined as like the front door of the building. A frontage is just like where it touches the street.
Okay, great. And then the second factual question is, if a person who owns a corner lot, let's say a corner that meets all the requirements, can that person purchase adjacent lots that are on the long end of the block or on a narrow street, and then combine that into one large property that would be eligible for transit-oriented development apartment housing?
Yes, you can assemble a lot for this. There's no like provision that says like an existing lot as of December 5th, 2024.
Right.
So that means you can assemble a lot the same way that you do a zoning lot merger today, where it has to have like 10 feet of contiguity. Like there's rules about what how you qualify for zoning lot merger, and it has to be recorded. But as long as you can do that, then yes, that's correct.
Okay, so it doesn't matter even if that new property is on a long end or a narrow street, it would be combined into, as long as one piece still is adjacent to a wide street or a short end of the block, it would be eligible.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they were combined into a single lot where that lot has the frontage on the, exactly. Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And I have questions about landmarking, but I think maybe you're not the right person for that.
Yeah, that may be for another discussion.
Yeah,
Go
okay,
ahead,
we can
sorry.
save that for another discussion. Not about the landmark TDR program, but about like the landmarking process. Okay, cool. We can save that for another person.
Okay.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you, sir. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say something else.
Oh, I was just going to respond to a question in the chat that I think was from Sean about the City of Yes housing opportunity versus other proposals. Do you all have specific questions about how these proposals interact? I mean, they're all like now the underlying zoning taken together. It's the new zoning resolution. But if you have specific questions about interactions, I'm happy to either try to answer them or take them back to the team from those teams if they're more specific to economic opportunity or carbon neutrality. But it'd be helpful to have like specific questions, I think.
Sean, did you have any specific questions at this point, or?
No, I thought the board just wanted like a fuller understanding of how the three ZTAs overlapped like on our map. And so, I mean, I don't know, we can circle back on that. I thought this was kind of a lot of stuff that had been presented before. I thought we were looking at sort of the three of them all together, but perhaps I misunderstood or didn't communicate clearly, and we can come back to you on that.
Okay, we haven't produced like maps. Those also have maps, but I can't think of like a map of an overlap necessarily that we've produced. But if you have questions about the intersections, just let us know.
Yeah, the question would be, what are they?
I mean, I guess like they're all, like the uses changed in City of Yes for economic opportunity, the rules changed for, bulk and various things like town center for housing opportunity. They're all now like the as of right in most cases, like zoning for the zoning resolution now. So I guess like to go through what are they would I would walk through the entire zoning resolution at this point, so but if we come up with some examples or like specific cases, if maybe that might be a better starting point.
Okay.
Sorry, you're not.
No worries.
All right. Well, I guess just to ask it that way then. I mean, it's probably too early yet, I would imagine. But are there any cases that you've seen come through to the DCP that might be instructive in terms of how developers may be applying the new requirements?
Um, I can't say that I can think of any great examples. At least, I specialize in housing opportunities, so I'd be more aware of those cases. Yet since these are, as of right rules, the people would proceed directly to Department of Buildings to build under these rules, as long as they're using the existing zoning. But we will be tracking. We're developing, tracking like protocols for when these different types of buildings are built, like so we can track how many units are produced in the Department of City Planning, through transit-oriented development or town center, et cetera. So we will be tracking those and could, it's too soon, I think, to say now. I guess the only sort of ongoing implementation thing that Department of City Planning is like sort of keeping an eye on is the accessory dwelling unit, or not that we're not keeping an eye on the others, but that we're actively involved in the implementation protocols for the accessory dwelling unit. There are some accessory dwelling unit rules that have just yet to be developed. As I mentioned during the presentation, they're required to be developed within 180 days of the passage of the text amendment, which puts us in, I think, June 2025. So there's an ongoing working group with the lead agencies on those different rules. So there's rules I mentioned about stormwater flooding and inland flooding led by DEP, rules about radon testing led by DOHMH, and then rules for the basement legalization program. So those are all still in development and have to be developed by mid-June. So that's being coordinated by City Hall in an interagency working group. So we are still we are seeing some inquiries from homeowners about accessory dwelling units and how to proceed, and are developing guidance in response to those inquiries. So those are the ones that are most coming across our desk still, I guess.
Okay, and it will be DCP that will be spearheading that in terms of who will be administering, those requests, or we don't
You
know
mean like
yet.
requests from homeowners?
Right.
They will be directed to HPD. HPD is going to have an
HPD
office
will.
that's
Okay.
responsible for like homeowner assistance. They
Mm-hmm.
have a web page up with but that's just really like a landing page right now. They're going to be developing a more robust like toolbox for homeowners that'll have things like pre-approved plans, but also like I think like someone who can sort of provide like counseling to a homeowner interested in providing accessory dwelling units. But that is not up and running yet. But HPD is going to be the lead agency on that.
Okay, and will all that be available for public viewing as well?
Yes, yeah, that's going to be like a public resource.
As well as your tracking, the DCP's tracking of City of Yes related type buildings that are going to be coming through the pipeline. Just wondering to figure out how, for us, for our purposes, to be able to track these.
Yeah. So as you guys probably know, we like report housing production through the department's housing database, which is a public resource that reports on all housing units permitted, completed, demolished in the city. So the team that works on that is working on the reporting system. I don't know that we have like a, anything to share yet about like the sort of public facing aspect of it, but I imagine it will, take a format similar to the existing housing database.
Okay. All right. I won't belabor the point because we have a few more questions here. We have board member Prasad and then our board chair, Carl Henry Caesar. But first, Barton. No, we're not. Barton, are you there? Okay. We'll come back to you, Barton, if you're still if you still have your question. Chair Carl Henry Caesar, please.
Sure. Can folks hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Excellent. So yes, thank you so much for your presentation. And so an example of, I guess, like some of the, I'm just spitballing here, but like a question of some of the potential cross impacts would be, I remember for carbon neutrality, I think there was some guidance regarding like I thought there was either square footage or roof in terms of maybe putting like solar panels or maybe building some sort of like energy infrastructure. And then I know for one of the, I believe if I remember correctly, it was either for economic opportunity. I think it was for economic opportunity. There was a provision about allowing like retail, I guess, on like a floor that wasn't the ground one, right? So I'm just spitballing here, Veronica, but I guess it's like there are questions that we can think of and come back to you, but I guess it's just a question of, hey, how would that look like if you did have a building where you did have retail on a floor that wasn't the first one, but then you also had, I guess, the solar panels or whatever this other thing is on top, like what would that look like? So, that's over 1,000 pages of zoning resolution that's been adopted. So I
Yeah.
definitely don't have the precise thing, but that's just like I'm just spitballing like some of the potential crisscrosses and just some further interest. So like the district manager said, yes, like we can definitely circle back and think of some of the questions we have regarding what all those cross impacts will look like, but that's just me spitballing an example of some of those things.
Yeah, to respond just quickly to those, but also like, obviously, like you said, these are just examples, but
Yeah, exactly.
solar panels, yeah, are allowed up to 18 inches above the roof on like an accessory structure in a rear yard. So that would include like a
Hmm.
garage or an accessory dwelling unit. So like that's a good example of you could put solar panels on your, accessory dwelling unit, like by using the provisions of both of these text amendments.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, similarly, like town center commercial uses in these districts, C1 and C2 districts can't go above the second story, so you couldn't have, you know, commercial uses on the roof or on the fifth story of a town center building, but you could on the first two stories.
Hmm.
But yeah, it'd be great to, get some more of these questions. There's basically an unlimited number of these questions, which I'm sure, some of them will cross your mind as you start to, think about them more and these people start to build under these rules more and more. Um, but so yeah, feel free to keep sending them our way.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And I think Barton is up back online. Are you there, Barton? No, maybe not. Okay. Just okay then. Sean, just I see your hand is still up. Did you have any?
I do. I put my hand up again. I really I wanted to ask a question about what DCP is doing with like community groups and the land use attorneys that operate most frequently in New York City, because soon after this board primarily supported, I mean, pretty much supported City of Yes for housing opportunity, the next land use item was a variance. And the attorney for the applicant for the variance, which was to use a building in a residential zone for ongoing manufacturing, an auto shop, the attorney told this board several times, like, look, if you don't approve this variance because of City of Yes for housing opportunity, you're going to get a 9-story building and they're not going to have any parking requirements. It just sort of it felt sort of like weaponizing City of Yes. And I pointed out a couple of times that the board had supported City of Yes. So I just, and then I know in 18 that they supported City of Yes for carbon neutrality, but at a huge meeting when the committee learned that there was going to be a lithium battery storage application. So to the extent that you got your yes on City of Yeses, it doesn't seem that your work is over. And I'm wondering, and maybe this meeting is a good case in point that you are still continuing to do your community outreach. But it seems like in theory, people were for it, but when it comes home, there's still a lot of community pushback. This board, by the way, voted unanimously to extend the variance.
Yeah, I see if Brooklyn office has anything more to say about like that specific variance situation, or I'm not, like as familiar with the details of that specifically, but in terms of what we're doing for like land use attorneys, community-based groups, things like that, we are doing, significant practitioner outreach, especially led by our zoning division, and we have a division was previously known as planning support, that provides sort of like support to different planning processes to like streamline them. And we've done a number of practitioner forums where like land use attorneys, architects, other sort of, frequent flyers have attended to familiarize themselves with the rules and how they have changed. We're working at a number of resources, including like a new zoning handbook to help practitioners and members of the public, community boards, understand how the zoning has changed, because we understand that it is a lot of changes. It's a lot to absorb, and also just a lot to for communities to understand what's allowed. Like in the examples you outlined, I think it's always a situation to understand what's allowed today, like versus what's allowed in when someone comes before you with a specific application. I don't know about like this how if we'd say that's a common thing for people to be. I would not remark that's a trend, like weaponizing City of Yes for housing opportunity necessarily. It is as of right zoning, so like it's not really like someone can. That's a one specific case, I suppose, but it's not like a threat someone can wield. It is the zoning. So yeah. But in terms of getting people to understand what that zoning is, we're doing our best to get out there before various audiences. I don't know if Brooklyn office has anything to add about that variance. I don't know if there are any details or anything you want to add.
Yeah, thanks, Veronica. And hi all. I'm Joshua Willow, planner in the Brooklyn office at City Planning. Is this the Bedford Avenue? Yeah, thanks, Sean. So, yeah, I know you reached out about this. We're checking with BSA, but from my understanding, they've had since they got their C of O in 1996. Had a special permit that had to renew every 10 years. So they're for the parking garage, so they're doing that again. I wasn't at the hearing, so we'll have to follow up to see exactly what they're saying. But as Veronica mentioned, this is zoning as of right now. So if they're saying that there could be another use that potentially is less exciting for the board. I can't speak to that, but we are doing outreach with the land use attorneys. We work with them correctly often, and we did a lot of outreach early on with City of Yes. So they're updated on everything we're doing, and we're working close with them. So, but we'll follow up on the Bedford
Yeah,
project.
I was there today, Josh. I'm happy to talk to you about it tomorrow.
Great, thanks.
In the week.
All right, thank you. All right, so just to wrap up our discussion here, because I know we're sort of reaching our allotted time, I'm going to say, okay, so looks like Veronica, you responded to one of the questions there. So if you could just quickly maybe summarize for us, I think it was Mark's question.
Sure. It was a clarification about if it's 5,000 square feet or over 5,000 square feet to qualify under the, what we've described in this presentation as transit-oriented development. It's at least 5,000 square feet is the wording of the zoning resolution, which means that 5,000 square feet or more. For all of these, like a really helpful resource is the definition of qualifying residential site in 1210. This like outlines the various pathways in that definition for how so what I've described in this is transit-oriented development, town center zoning. Those are called qualifying residential sites in the zoning resolution. So the criterion are all outlined in 1210. So feel free to follow up with questions also if you have more, since I mentioned you had more. But
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. And then let's see, I have Barden's questions real quick here, so we'll go through those. So the first question is sort of similar clarification. It is under direct fixes, can lots over 4,000 square feet south of Avenue H build to FAR 1.0 or 0.6? Unsure of how those two fixes interact.
That's a great clarifying question. I'm going to have to get back to you on that just because I don't want to speak off the cuff on that. But yeah, I'll send you a follow-up email tomorrow on that. Just want to confirm my understanding before I verbalize it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And then I think the second one is a comment, but I'll read it. It says, they're hoping to track the larger effects of City of Yes. I'm curious to ultimately learn the enforcement numbers. With so much change, there's the potential for a fair bit of confusion of use. I'm not quite sure what that necessarily relates to. I'm sorry, Barden, but I imagine that that just speaks to the the data collection on this, and it sounds like there will be that's a continuing process at this point in terms of how boards like us and other folks that are interested will be able to track these sorts of trends moving forward.
Yeah, and I think maybe that was also a question about enforcement in terms like Department of Buildings enforcement. So I'll just mention that the practitioner outreach I mentioned also covers the Department of Buildings. Obviously, their plan examiners are been fully briefed on these rules. Yeah, they're following this and working closely with our zoning division to make sure they understand what is allowed as of right in the new, any permits coming across their desk from City of Yes for Housing Opportunity further. So
Okay, very good. All right, so with that, I will not seeing any other questions. I think we'll conclude our discussion on this topic for tonight. So thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Josh, for chiming in as well, and for everyone who has participated. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Carl. Did I think you just chimed in right in a second. So I just want to make sure we get your comment as well. Do you want to just voice that for us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So as you were like reading off Barton's questions, right? And then touching base about like the data collection and the enforcement, then that did pop something in my head. And just like Veronica, yeah, you're not DCP, you're not DOB, right? It's just a question of do you have you heard any conversations in terms of, whether DOB would be looking to hire new staff in order to meet that potential increase in demand? And I say demand, I apologize because I need to find a better word. But basically, like since we do have these three big bodies of zoning resolutions that are now interacting with each other, right? Do you know if DOB does plan on hiring new staff to deal with, I guess, maybe the potential uptick in clarifying questions or unforeseen like use cases, or if you don't know if they will, but then they would still be training existing people to handle that stuff, right? Like, have you heard anything about those conversations kind of starting at the DOB level, or not necessarily yet?
yeah, I mean, the Department of Buildings has been aware this was coming and is working on sort of their like internal organization for like how
Okay.
to best review things, including like, accessory dwelling units, like things that require sort of a different type of review they used to. I will
Hmm.
have to review the companion agreements to the points of agreement to this text amendment to see if any specific provisions that relate to this were included. I don't want to promise something that wasn't promised there. But I
No, that's
believe there
fine. I
may
was just
be
curious,
there may
like
be
so I
Department of Buildings commitments included in that companion to the text amendment. So I will put that on my list to get back to you as well.
okay, cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Okay, and thank you. All right, with that, I will officially close our conversation for tonight. So thank you again, Veronica. Thank you, Josh, and for everyone who participated in our discussion. And again, this will be a continuing conversation that all of us will be having. So thank you all very much.
Thanks for
Okay,
having us.
so
Good night.
good night. All right, so at this point, I will turn it over to my co-chair, Ms. Minnick, and I will let her carry on through with the next agenda item this evening. So Melissa, take it away.
Thank you, Greg. So our next speaker tonight is Anthony Coker. He is the program manager at the organization Neighbors Helping Neighbors, which is an affiliate of Fifth Avenue Committee. But these are nonprofits in South Brooklyn. They're over in the Park Slope area. And Neighbors Helping Neighbors has several services, so several programs and services for anybody who would like to use these. They're completely free. They offer first-time homebuyer education and counseling. So it works very well for those who are familiar or at all know about the city's down payment assistance program for first-time homebuyers. NHN is actually a program that will work with that and qualify for down payment assistance and the kind of counseling that you need. They also have tenant organizing and advocacy, and there's homeowner services and foreclosure prevention counseling. So Anthony will be here he's here to share about NHN's programs tonight.
Yeah, I'm here. I feel like you kind of went into everything, so I think everybody's got.
Well, okay, we're done.
So should I be able to present? I guess I can, right? Let's see. I did bring some slides.
Yeah, we can get you a presenter status here.
Can you see the share
Yeah.
button at the bottom of your screen?
Yeah, let me see.
That's all yours.
Oh, consistent preferences. Okay. That should be fine. WebEx. Uh-oh. I mean, I might need to quit and reopen.
Hang on, let me see if I can just hit that. Does that help?
Let's see. Starting up with system preferences. Okay. Yeah, sometimes if you haven't used the software in a while, then you have to like reset everything. I might need to jump off and on. Let's see something.
So if you do that, if you can also simultaneously email the presentation to me, and then I'll be your backup if it doesn't work once you sign back on. How's that?
Okay.
That
What you
The info at CB14 Brooklyn, it's the email that you responded to when you got invited. Sorry.
Okay, hold on. Info at.
It's in the chat.
Info at CB14 Brooklyn.
That's it.
Okay. Okay, I'll try this now. Update. Okay, let's try it again.
Maybe it's the presentation because it's not letting me share either. It's giving me a message that I've never seen before.
Might be working. Go.
You got it?
I think. Do you see anything?
Sweet. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. Hey, so this is Neighbors Helping Neighbors. All right. So I'm with Neighbors Helping Neighbors. My name is Anthony Coker. I'm the program manager at Neighbors Helping Neighbors. So we're a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. We're founded in 1990. We're out in Brooklyn. We're an affiliate of Fifth Avenue Committee, and we do comprehensive neighborhood housing development and housing counseling. So the programs under NHN are like financial coaching, homebuyer education, counseling, foreclosure prevention, counseling, student loan counseling, and we help people access affordable home ownership opportunities and housing. And we also do home repairs, and we have a rooftop solar program. One of the things that we like to do is help people who are first-time home buyers access their first home. And so we will help people throughout all the steps of the home buying process. So I kind of listed them here. So someone might come into our office and maybe they don't know how much they can afford to buy, or maybe they don't know whether or not their credit is in check. And so we will sit down with them, we'll counsel them, we'll give them education first. and then we'll walk them through the home buying process, whether it's getting in touch with a lender, figuring out what grants they qualify for, accessing those grants, understanding the steps they need to like build their credit and savings. All these things are kind of in our purview on the home buying side. One of the things that you'll get access to is a detailed budget. We do a really deep analysis of people's housing costs to help them understand what they're spending and what they can do to make changes to their budget to make homeownership an affordable option for them. So we kind of run the numbers with them. We sit down with them and do the full counseling session after the education. Another thing we do is we sit down with somebody and we look at their ratios. So we're looking at their debt, their income, potential mortgage payments, and figuring out whether or not the potential home is going to be affordable for them. So will the payments be affordable to them, within line of their budget, within line of what they expect to pay? And then will it be long-term affordable? Will it be something that will be a benefit to them versus renting? So we look at the totality of the person and figure out how to help them achieve their goal whether it's home ownership or otherwise. And then we also help people access grants. We have a system where we put all of the information into our program, and we measure their income, savings, and other ratios against the program requirements for different grants that are available in the city. So there's city grants, there's state grants, there's lender specific grants. So we have a coalition of lenders that we work with, and they all offer different kinds of assistance. And so we put them through this matrix and we figure out whether or not they should be looking at one particular grant over another. And usually most people can qualify for some assistance. And so that's one of the benefits of counseling, is that usually counseling is a prerequisite to some of these grants. And once you have it, you get access to a lot of these different kinds of assistance that wouldn't be available to you if you were just going into the open market looking for a home. We also really do focus in on like the affordable home ownership opportunities in the city. I know we were talking about City of Yes earlier, and one thing I would have liked to have seen is more support from the city for affordable home ownership opportunities. Like we have HCFCs, Mitchell-Lamas, we have other kinds of affordable home ownership opportunities. My program, we're working with Habitat for Humanity on these net zero houses out in Queens, and those will be permanently affordable housing built on the community land trust model. And so that's another really great option for families. And so people who come to my program, they get access to this wealth of knowledge. So we have this expertise around what is affordable, what are the tactics that New Yorkers use to remain in place, right? Because the city is growing wealthier and wealthier, and some of us are being left behind. And so we have access to the little, the opportunities that have been placed in the city that most, longtime New Yorkers may know about. We have access to those opportunities, and we kind of target that, and we guide people towards that. So whether it's a Mitchell-Lama co-op, HDFC co-op, other kinds of affordable homeownership opportunities, also through Fifth Avenue Committee, which is a housing developer. We build a lot of affordable housing, and sometimes there are housing ownership opportunities there. And so I know I'm talking a lot about ownership because I think ownership is really important. I know I'm sitting in front of a community board right now, and I know that many of you may be owners because oftentimes those are the kinds of people who are represented in these kinds of bodies. And I, really think that that's kind of one of the foundations to community building, is having people have a stake in their community. And also ownership allows people to remain in place as, the community wealth grows, housing prices go up, and many of our long-term residents wind up moving out. If you're an owner, you have a better opportunity to stick around. So one of the things we do is we do promote homeownership as one of the foundations to like affordable housing and also wealth building. This is some contact information. This is the link to our eHome course. It's a course that most families have to take in order to access counseling. So we give them education, and then after the education course, we sit down with them counsel them throughout the entire process. It may take many months or years, but we'll do it all for free. Another thing we do is foreclosure prevention. So many of you are homeowners, and some people do get into trouble with their homes. And so we have a counselor on staff who helps people figure out what their options are. So people come to our office because they maybe have fallen behind on their mortgage, fallen behind on their co-op maintenance, fallen behind on their property taxes or utility bills, and they need some help. And so we will help them work out a plan either to negotiate with their lender, find access to legal representation to help them through the foreclosure process, get them access to grants and loans to help them either make repairs on their home, rescue funds to help them pay off their arrears, things of that nature. I mean, sometimes the people who come through our doors are coming in because maybe they're a small landlord and they need a small repair, and without that repair, they can't, charge rent, and so that becomes an issue for the affordability for them. So we try to get them access to that, to some grants or some low interest loans to help them make those repairs. Mortgage default and delinquency. So most homeowners are maybe one missed check away from losing their homes, and we see this all the time. So we have options. We'll help people either figure out a reinstatement option, repayment options. So we speak directly to the lender on behalf of the participant, and we'll help them through the process. And we also have a lot of legal representation, free legal counsel that work with us, and we coordinate that for people in our community. Property tax arrears is another big thing. Right now, we're in the middle of the tax lien sale outreach. So on May 20th, the city is going to be selling off a lot of these property tax and utility arrear liens, and people could really lose their home for anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, and that's a really huge injustice. But there are options for people, and we have kind of lobbied the city to make sure there were a lot of options for people who are in that situation. And so there's a good chance that if someone is in that circumstance, we can help them out of it. And the kinds of people who fall into that circumstance are usually elderly people, people who have an inherited property, usually people who have paid off their mortgage, right? Because if you have a mortgage, then your lender will most likely pay these liens to avoid the foreclosure. So most of the people who are going through this situation are usually elderly people who've fallen behind, people who have inherited property, and there may have been some sort of time period between when the property was, conferred to them and when they realized that someone had passed away. So it's an estate issue, it's a elderly person's issue, it's a public health issue, and so we try to help people out of that situation. Tax lien sale on May 20th, like I said. There's a 90-day, 60-day, and 30-day notice that goes out. So the 90-day notice has already gone out. 60-day, I think, should be going out soon, or if not, has gone out already. And so we're in the middle of doing outreach around the community to make sure that people know that this is what's happening and there's awareness around that and that they have options. Ways to exit is tax lien sale. First way, pay what you owe. Second, you can get on the payment plan. Third option would be, apply for a specific tax exemption. So if you are on one of these tax exemptions, senior citizens tax exemption, disabled homeowners tax exemption, or veterans tax exemption, then you are automatically removed from the list. So now think about the kind of communities that we're looking at here who are on this list and are unaware. The very people that we don't expect to have to go through this in a process of where they may lose all of their equity, right? Disabled people, veterans who may be injured or disabled, citizens, senior citizens, right? Another way you can get out of the list, submit a lien sale easy exit program application. So if you earn less than $107,000, you have an easy exit out of the tax lien. Submit an emergency repair certificate. So if you need to make repairs in your home, the city is lenient in that regard. So you just have to put in an application here. Oh, oops, did I duplicate that? Okay. If you need help applying, reach out to my counselor, Caitlin Gravel, and our next webinar will be on April 2nd at noon. We will talk in depth about all these topics. That's the QR code for the webinar. So if you need help understanding that, reach out to us. And then lastly, we have a new program called Barrio Solar. It's a rooftop solar leasing program. So we ran the program in 2022. At the time, it was a subsidy. We were giving out up to $6,000 to subsidize middle-income households in the purchase of their of a solar panel. And the idea being that if you can get access to solar, you're going to lower your utility bills. You're going to go green, which is in line with what the city wants to do, electrification. So you're not going to be stranded out there with a gas line when everyone else is on electric. And also, it's an asset, right? So you get a new asset that actually kind of builds wealth for your family. So we did I believe 16 of those across mostly Brooklyn. I know we see one in the Bronx, but mostly Brooklyn we were targeting, and we were able to have some success there. But we saw that even though we had some success, it was not probably not enough for a lot of these middle income families. So we restructured the program, and now we're offering a much deeper subsidy. We're structuring it as a lease program. So what would happen with a family would come to us, and we would purchase the panels for them and own it for them, pass on a lot of the tax savings that are available to middle income families, whether it's the federal tax benefits, state tax, property taxes, all those different things. We're going to pass on those savings to them and structure a lease over 7 years that will take advantage of all those savings. And after 7 years, we're going to essentially, allow them to purchase the panels for a very reduced cost, right? So the idea is that 7 years and then you own the panels yourself. And we're structuring it so that even at the beginning, at the outset of the contract, you should be saving at least 20% on your utilities, so on your electric bill. Why Barry Solar? It's a campaign that breaks down barriers to lower income families. We are partnered with Solar One for technical expertise, and so Solar One is another nonprofit that focuses mainly on clean energy, and so we're partnered with them to offer this program. One of the things that we're really interested in is making sure that people aren't being ripped off. There are a lot of solar scams and a lot of solar programs that are not easy for people to understand. I know a lot of people have heard of PPAs, and those are kind of very kind of esoteric ways of billing and structuring a contract. And so we decided to go away from that, and we decided to do a lease, which is a set payment monthly, so that everyone can understand what they're paying, what they're going to get out of it, and all the savings will be laid out in front of them. So Solar One works with us. We also are working with Fifth Avenue Committee on this program. And if you want to get started on the path to solar, reach out to JC, or you can hit that QR code, which will take you to our website. Any questions?
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, if anybody has any questions for any of Neighbors Helping Neighbors programs here for Anthony.
I'd like to find out who funds Neighbors Helping Neighbors.
Yeah, so we are funded. I mean, the state funds us. There's a lot of state funding for under what's called the Homeowners Protection Program. So it's a huge program started by the New York Attorney General, and that really funds work to prevent housing loss, right? So it funds a lot of our foreclosure prevention work. And the way the fund kind of started was during the financial crisis in 2008, when the AG was suing all these banks, and they were getting these settlements. That settlement money went into a fund that started the HOP program, which is how we are funded largely. Now that money is going into the general fund, and so now we kind of we lobby the city and the state to keep funding it, but we're funded through state funding. We also are HUD-approved housing counseling agency, so we do have some federal funding. And yeah, and then we get other funding from other sources. We compete for funding.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just chime in here too. Full disclosure is I used to work for Neighbors Helping Neighbors and Fifth Avenue Committee, and I did work in communications and development. So doing a lot of grant writing, and it's a lot of city, state, federal funds that go into all of this, as well as then discretionary funds from more local politicians as well for all of these programs. So come springtime, come around now, I know it's a lot of people who are not me anymore who are writing about all of these programs and this very good work, and about getting the support for all of this work.
Thank you.
Sure. Is there anyone else who has? Oh, Sean, it looks like.
And then I said, let me stop.
Thank you. Yeah, I sort of back on the theme and trying to bring these two presentations together. I'm wondering if some of your programming might be targeted with City of Yes in mind. I'm thinking of the solar panels in neighborhoods that might begin to take advantage of the changes in the as of right installation of solar panels. And not to dwell on negative, but I remember those days when there was a lot of like predatory real estate brokers going after people, like often
Mhm.
older people, and saying like, you have a DOB violation, you have an illegal basement apartment, well, we'll help you out by buying your house. And, you know, so just sort of like trying to
All
prevent that.
yes. So, you know, we definitely see a lot of that going on, and we do a lot of advocacy work. Right now, I'm promoting an anti-flipping bill. So property flipping is a big problem because it leads to some of that targeting of people who have, built up equity. It's like people can't watch someone build equity without like, being, jealous or whatever. So we see a lot of that targeting, and so we do a lot of work advocating, and we do try to promote certain bills and policies that'll help that. And as far as City of Yes, I'm a pretty big proponent of some of what's going on there. I think that it's the right thing because it's all of the above, right? So it's like taking the city and basically, help allowing all the neighborhoods around the city to mature and thicken the way they ought to. Because a lot of times, throughout history, we've spent a lot of time creating zoning that kind of restricts the way people build, the way cities like New York have naturally developed, right? So all the housing that we're used to here in New York, most of it is illegal at this point because of zoning. And that's kind of a shame because, the natural way that cities develop actually can teach us a lot about the way we have been able to maintain affordable housing throughout our history, right? So affordable housing issues are kind of a relatively new problem that we're having because of the way we decided to build our environments, right? Naturally, we would build from the middle outward, versus the other way around. And so CDBS is trying to address that by allowing as of right building in certain areas, allowing backyard conversions and basement conversions, backyard dwelling units, and all that stuff, all the above will help because it'll build housing in ways that aren't that conspicuous sometimes, and also allow every neighborhood to grow a little bit, which is what we probably need.
Thank you.
We had a hand or something? I thought I saw something. Okay.
I don't see one right now. Maybe people have to think of their questions. They have. To say, I actually have one.
Hmm.
Just going back to first-time homebuyer programs as a renter who's on this call, and the idea of home ownership in New York can be a little intimidating, I'll say. What would be the right time to actually start even thinking about that? Like, is it, or at least approaching NHN around that? Would that be when thinking about like just, well, the idea of maybe someday
I mean, I think
there's, I don't want to buy a place, or like once I actually have a place I've seen, and okay, hey, maybe I should contact you now.
I think education is great. We have an education program that'll be fine. People can come to it. We do free webinars, and people can just kind of like get immersed in the knowledge of it. So kind of keep it in the background. That's one thing that some people do who aren't ready. They come to our workshops, and I try to make sure that my workshops have guest speakers from different areas of the housing world who can talk about the work they're doing, and that helps for those who are further off. And I think once someone has like stable housing, that's the next step is probably thinking about homeownership, especially in New York, where stable housing can be kind of illusory, right? You might have a home that's affordable to you now, and then 2 years from now, it's going up by 25%. And so maybe you want to take that opportunity to like really look at what your options are, because there are affordable opportunities. Like we mentioned before, we have HCFCs, there are limited equity co-ops, which are an opportunity for people to kind of dig into New York and start their first step on the process of building equity and building themselves into the community. Because I know everybody wants to own a single family home with a white picket fence. I mean, I hear that every week people come to the doors and say, yeah, they come in, they say, I want corner lot, fence, backyard, outdoor space. And I say, where have you seen that on your way to work? Do you see that? Where do you see that? Because I don't see it on my way to work. So we have to deal with the housing that we have here, but I also think that we also have opportunities that other places don't have, right? So we have co-ops, we have different kinds of housing that has been built. And one thing that I would love to see the city do more of is, like I said, building that structured affordable housing, right? Like we had the Mitchell-Lama program in the city. That was one of the most successful programs the city has ever, or city and state has ever had. And it's gone essentially. I mean, it's those people who lived there, who moved in the 60s and 70s, they're still, you know, bearing witness to that. But I think if they could do something like that again, it would be great. The land trust model is very nice. I think from my perspective, you know, we do need to build more because building more will bring down prices eventually, but that's kind of long run. That's kind of in the long run if we build enough. But I think immediate solutions are things like that. Like, can we build some affordable housing to make sure that we don't lose too many of these homeowners or these people who kind of have become like the backbone of the city. I know we saw during the pandemic, the people who wind up going to work every day were the ones who are now being pushed out of the city. And so we need to do something to make sure that those people aren't living in New Jersey or Connecticut and commuting into the city to help us do our jobs here, right? Yes.
You mentioned Mitchell-Lama, and that was like, I don't know, 60 years ago, and it seems that the only housing that the city or government is involved in is those percentages that they have developers set aside. Do you see the government becoming involved in housing again as they did with Mitchell-Lama and those kinds of development of 60, 50 years ago?
I don't see the will. I see that it ought to happen, but I don't see when I go to like, you know, meetings where politicians are available, I don't see that. And I even see a lot of people who are elected officials kind of, you know, leaning towards the vote, like, oh, well, it's like I was in a meeting, where was that? It was the Black Asian Caucus meeting, and I was talking with some of the people there about this anti-flipping bill that we're promoting, and they were asking me questions that were kind of in line with like the developers, like, oh, what, you know, what about a little bit of flipping? Is that okay? And it's like, well, I mean, no, not in this environment. And it's hard to say that, but no, it's not okay.
But there is pressure from the public, but they just don't seem to be addressing that pressure.
Oh, they don't. They don't. Exactly. And when you think about it, their constituents are the people who are being harassed by these developers and flippers, and still we're not getting anything.
Thank you.
Sean?
Thanks. I kind of want to follow up on that a little bit because, you know, there's will and then there's investment returns, you know, and so I wonder if, and probably the answer to this is a whole, like you have to get a degree to be able to answer this, but what were the funding formulas that were available and attractive back in the day when we had Mitchell-Lama and Nehemiah and the Paths to Home Ownership programs, and why can't they exist now? Is there something in the financing that's really the barrier?
I don't know the answer to that. I imagine that land values were a lot lower back then, right? Because we're looking at the city of the 60s and 70s. So I imagine property values were a lot lower. There's also like the city used to own a lot more land than it does now. So that's probably another thing. Could they do it today? I think they could. I don't see why they couldn't. Yes.
Some of the funding, I think, was related to urban development,
Yes.
urban renewal, I mean.
Exactly.
And so we also saw some really bad things that happened with urban renewal. And so that made it, you know, the federal funding for a lot of things changed, including public housing. But also, you know, the public were so hurt, is the only word I can think about, by some of the urban renewal projects. So that didn't help either. And of course, we went through those fiscal problems that cities had in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at it, some of the housing that was cited were cited on properties that, yeah, there were small communities. I live in a Mitchell-Lama, so I live, you know, I'm, not only a spokesman, I'm also a client. And yeah, I mean, I know that the property I live on used to be a bunch of little townhouses, and the tower I live in is 23 stories. It kind of towers over the rest of the neighborhood. I live in Clinton Hill, so it's, 23-story tower in the middle of like kind of mid-rise. Yeah, I get that too. Greg?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just sort of following up on this discussion, and thank you for all of this. Just to give sort of the background here, you mentioned community land trusts as an option. Just thinking of the other side, assuming that federal funding may be not exactly forthcoming in the coming at least immediate years. Just thinking about from the other side to see what kind of initiatives at least could jumpstart things. What has been your experience with community land trust? Because I see that it's sort of gaining momentum, but
Gaining momentum, yeah. I think
but 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 how feasible do you think it is, sort of on a larger scale than what has been
I
done so
mean,
far?
I don't, it's not going to solve the problem per se, like on a large scale. But I think it's one of the solutions that allows the community to continue to maintain a footprint in the neighborhood, right? So like we're talking about like permanently, we will have middle income and low income people living in this part of the city. That's a win in a place like New York. I think uh, Borough Community Land Trust is the one that I work with, and they have some funding and they have some land and they have some property. And I know that one of the options for that tax lien sale is for first from the properties that are in this lien sale to be turned over to a land trust. And so that's another option that might help grow that movement. Because I mean, think about if you're like losing your home or you can no longer afford the home, and someone gives you the option of like living in it, living out your days in that home, and then that home being kind of given to kind of a semi-charitable use, right? A community development use. I think that's something that people, especially elderly people who are investing in the community, might think is valuable and useful, and that might be something that grows that movement. But I don't think that community land trusts are gonna, in and of themselves, like end the housing shortage, because I think housing is a regional problem, right? So it's not something that New York City, you can't solve New York City's problem. It's impossible, right?
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Yeah, I think that's sort of the bigger piece of all this, right? Just
Yeah, what's Long Island doing? What are they doing over there, right?
absolutely, no question. All right, thank you.
We're just going to jump in there and say, and I was just thinking of Interborough and some others, and the scatter site community land trust model,
Mm.
and in a place like New York, where it seems like almost every square inch of land is taken up, kind of having to rethink and redefine some of these models like community land trusts, where it's like, oh yeah, this is a great model, but you need space to be able to do this, and reimagining what that actually looks like. Well, why does all the space have to be in one physical space?
Mhm.
And well, you can actually combine a lot of different properties and put that all under one space and still give it the same benefits, and then pass that on. So again, one of the things I think is innovative and great about Interborough and some other newer community land trusts, rather than like those that, well, we've already filled up all the maps and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Giving us a lot to think about. Use.
Okay, well, I think that concludes our agenda for this evening. We always put on our agendas new business, unless there's anything anyone would like to bring up at this point that wasn't related to this evening's discussion. Certainly, we can entertain that for a few moments. Just open up the floor for a moment if anyone has anything. If not, I guess we'll conclude for this evening. Just sort of waiting another moment here, but seeing nothing at the moment. Certainly, there are will be more opportunities to continue these conversations through this committee, through the board at large, and through our other committees as well. Obviously, a lot of these topics are integrate with all of our work on the board. But we thank everyone for joining us this evening, and this will be posted. If anyone came late, will be posted on our YouTube channel. If anyone wants to go back and review anything that happened, we'll post the presentation materials as well on the district website. So thank you all, and we'll conclude for the evening. So thanks. Good night.
Thank you.